going to start our ag breakout session number 2. The title is on international experience on coping with water limitation. And my name is Daniele Zaccaria. I'm an ag water management specialist with the University of California, UC Davis, and I'll be moderating together with Professor Stuart Stile from ITRC in Cal Poly this session. Stu, do you want to say something to the audience? I want to make sure that everybody is awake, so please do.
Sure. Good morning. I'm glad everyone could join us for this second ag session. So hopefully we won't have any glitches. I hope we got them all resolved from yesterday.
Thank you, Stu. So as from the beginning of our session, I'd like to thank our platinum sponsors that made all this virtual event possible this year. And here's our platinum sponsors and our other sponsor of this event. We are going to play a couple of sponsor videos, and then we'll go more into the detail of this presentation. So Stu, whenever you're ready, we can probably start with playing the sponsor videos.
Okay, so you need to stop sharing and then I'll share. All right.
Central started as a very small company, and we've now installed and touched fields and systems in 15 plus different crops in 7 different counties in 3 different states.
One of the things that sets us apart here at Central Irrigation is problem solving. We do that through collaborative teamwork. Every day and in every avenue we'll run into problems, but we utilize technology at hand, the ingenuity that we have available to us to create new solutions to old problems or even new solutions to new problems.
Designing irrigation systems has so much to do with farming. So we learned that having designers who have a farming background are much more valuable than someone who's just good at math. A central irrigation engineer can become huge problem solvers for farmers in the area.
Central, even though it's newly established, has a bunch of unique minds working here that are constantly innovating and not looking just to sell a system. We're looking to constantly get the best yield for a farmer, the best usage of their water. And I think at Central Irrigation, we are doing something that no other companies in the valley, let alone the state, are doing today.
As a grower, one of my largest priorities is water efficiency, and Central Irrigation's innovations and design help me to leverage my water availability and really maximize every drop to grow the largest crop and get the largest yields that I can.
Central Irrigation Inc. was established by deeply rooted California family farms. And we identified at a very early stage the next generation that had a entrepreneurial and progressive spirit. That's what's continuing the growth, the progression, and the advancement in this space that's critically vital to create new ideas, solve difficult problems, and ultimately make it a joy to go to work and feed the world every day. Hi, I'm Keith with Central Irrigation, and we're here today on one of our most recent projects. And something at Central Irrigation that we've been recently focusing on is the operating cost of your system. The way we design and install systems could lead to lower operating costs in the future. And these operating costs are your energy use to actually run the system, or also your labor costs of maintaining the system. If it be flushing, if it be changing sets, or even just turning the system on or off.
There's a lot of farmers that come to us now with multiple water sources. A lot of them are trying to find canal water and add that into the wells they have on their property, or even bring canal water in from a district that they're not a part of and buy out a district water. We would highly recommend going with a reservoir system or some sort of system that centralizes it all in one spot. Having that centralized reservoir is pretty much the brain or the heartbeat of the system. It gives you security knowing that if you have water but you don't need it right away, you can take it and fill that reservoir and use it when you need it.
Some of the main things that we focus on in Central during our project construction is quality of work, precision during the job process, and completion of the project up to our customer standards. My favorite things about working directly with the customers is taking a vision from theory and making it a reality for them. It's an honest, transparent relationship where we operate as a team. We don't deal it as a single transaction. We look for a healthy working relationship for years to come.
We maintain all of our own install crews. At other companies, they use labor contractors. That enables us not to have to train new crews for every job.
It's important for our management team to get out there in the field, to lead by example. We enjoy getting out, getting our hands dirty, competitive in nature. That's what separates us apart. And the employees and the people that work with Central, that's the culture. Our goal at the end of the day is to make sure our customer is happy with the work we provided for them.
As a grower-owned company, we take pride in that the people that you will be talking to on a daily basis come from farming families. Our engineers, our salesmen, and our installers, and even some of our parts people and people in our office all have some type of farming background, may it be a family farm, a family dairy, or even involvement in their local FFA 4-H clubs.
Hi, my name is Ryan King. I'm the pump specialist here at Central Irrigation. We have the capabilities to work on the smallest submersible pumps to the biggest deep well pumps.
Hi, I'm Chase. I'm the general manager here at Central Tulare. We got the store behind me. Come check it out. Here at Central Irrigation, whether you're working with our design team, our sales team, or our store team, you're going to find employees that are friendly, happy to be where they're at, and want to help you as much as they can. So I'm a third-generation almond farmer. I grew up on an almond farm. At Central Irrigation, I became the designer, and we learned that having the passion for farming creates a better designer than just someone who's good at math, because designing an irrigation system has so much to do with laying out the actual farm itself. They can do pipe sizing, designing reservoirs, help with scheduling, and designing huge scale, multiple set, multiple pump systems for farms anywhere from 800 to 10,000 acres. Seeing the end result when the farmer gets to finally turn his irrigation system on and see the water come out, seeing that smile on especially farmers who it's their first irrigation system is one of the biggest reasons why designers do what they do, is to see that smile on their face and know that we solved a huge problem for them.
Central Irrigation is 100% owned by farmers, so we look at our irrigation design and installation from the farmer's point of view, and labor costs are increasing rapidly in California. So we try to use best-in-class products to make sure that when you do have to do maintenance programs, that they are few and far between. At Central Irrigation, we take a lot of pride in the people that make up our company. The key to our business is our talent is always pushing to be on the cutting edge of the irrigation business. We know that in order to be relevant in the future, we need to be focusing on the problems of the future. We invest in all of these things so we can ultimately be the #1 irrigation company of the future in California agriculture.
Central Irrigation is a growing company. Designers, engineering, logistics, salesmen, installers, office staff. There's so many different things that go into an irrigation project.
One of the things that's made this company grow so fast is, the young leaders that we have in it that have the ambition to go out and never settle and just keep growing and growing.
I chose Central because it's relationship first, and the employees are top-notch, honest, hardworking, and you look at pricing, you look at products, but that it factor hit me, going back to the relationship, just that positive vibe that I got. So you can't put a price on that.
Since Central Irrigation Inc. is 100% owned and operated by California farmers, which allows us to have a broad perspective of our own for what is demanded by the California ag marketplace.
Okay, that was our first vendor. I should have mentioned before I started that we're going to have Series Imaging do a presentation, but we opted to use the Central Irrigation video again from yesterday. I know they did a good job kind of pulling one together, and we weren't able to get a Series 1 set up before the conference here. So I'm going to go ahead and start the second one with WiseCon. So I apologize for not mentioning that before I started. And we'll do the second one.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you guys are enjoying the CII conference right now. My name is Daryl Hadlick, and I'm from WiseCon Engineering. I'm actually the Northern Central Valley Sales Manager. I'm just going to give you a quick presentation about who we are, what we do, and then some case examples of the different types of projects that we've been on with irrigation automation. So we are WiseCon. We were founded in 2006. We came to California in 2015. We now have over 10,000 units deployed. So nodes are our radio terminal units that are out in the field that are either actuating pumps or valves or gathering sensor information from soil moisture probes, weather stations, and other variables. And we're across over 250,000 acres with more than 20 distributors in the United States. And that keeps growing. We're almost up to 30 now, with 15 alone in California. We also have 2,000 users in 5 different countries, with both a support and manufacturing warehouse, both in Fresno, California, as well as Chile. We also have over 5 API integrations in California. So with other companies that are also providing services like irrigation recommendations, we come in with the hardware side of things, and we actually close that loop for irrigation with the execution aspect. So here's just a quick snapshot of where we are in the United States. You can see a lot of our business is concentrated in California, but we are growing and moving out more into the States and down into Mexico. So what is Drop Control? Drop Control is an online irrigation management system. We like to think of it as the remote control of the farm. So not only are we bringing in sensor data, but our bread and butter is our automation aspect. So it's a reliable irrigation monitoring and control system. We can connect to any sensor, operate wireless valves, or a completely open protocol system. So if you have old probes or old sensors there and we can tie into them, that's not a problem. That saves you a cost on having to buy new stuff. But as you can see here, we've got everything operating through the cloud. So using Amazon Web Services from your phone, from the laptop, you can schedule irrigations, send it to the cloud. It then sends to our gateway unit, which there's 1 gateway unit per operation. And we have, using a cellular connection, either AT&T or Verizon, that is sending data back to the gateway from the sensors that it gets in the field. And then it goes directly onto your phone or laptop every 15 minutes. And these sensors in the field are being collected by other data loggers. So those data loggers are using a 900 megahertz radio frequency to bounce around and send data to each other so that we get accurate data fast and in real time. We can do different stuff like monitoring pressure before and after the filter, the reservoir level in the back. You can calculate OPE or operating efficiency of your pump. We'll also do open protocol with like wireless, different wireless valves, as well as weather station data for either high temperatures in the summer or low temperatures to control frost throughout the season. We also do a lot of work with our soil moisture sensors, so providing growers who are intensively looking at their telemetry and trying to correlate their soil moisture data along with their irrigations plan throughout the season. And then all of that from a wireless and monitoring system, either from your phone or from the office. We're composed of our hardware and our software. So I went over a little bit about drop control and what it can do and the basics, and then also the hardware that we have out in the field. So we have our C1, X1, and M1. The M1's like another data logger. So any pressure switches, weather stations, soil moisture probes, anything sensor related in the field that you'd like to receive data on and look at on your account, we use that, the M1 for that. Then we have our C1, which is our total pump filter station controlling node. It can control 5 different pump systems, and with all of the add-ons, it can control over 40 valves easily, all either from a central location. It even has Bluetooth, so you can come up to it, and for local control, if you don't have any cellular signal, you can definitely turn on your C1 and operate pumps and valves Bluetooth with your phone. Then we have our X1. So that's the flagship node. That is the one that a lot of growers will see out in the field. So it can do both. It can pick up readings from a soil moisture probe, from a Davis weather station, and all while, operating a valve in the field, operating a pump at the pump station. Anything you can do. It's a really versatile node. Then we have our software, so drop control. So either using the drop control app or via third party, like I talked about, we have the API integrations. So a lot of guys will be sending the irrigation recommendation, goes over to drop control. The grower just confirms the set schedule, goes through the cloud, gets downloaded onto the gateway and sent out with the commands into the field using that radio network. So here's our quick snapshot of the web page. And then we have our map and node layout. So this is where growers can see, where their nodes are in the field. They all have their blocks or zones separated out however they'd like. So using a Google Earth KMZ file, we go in here, map that out for them so that we have an accurate reading on which blocks are going to be currently running, which blocks are dry, if they're using soil moisture probes, or all the data where it is in the field. It's really easy to schedule. We've got 3 different ways. So duration, either by the hours, date and time, which is really specific, or volumetrically. So if you have a correct flow meter entry into drop control, as well as the correct amount of acreage, we have our own formula that we use that to calculate, how many inches we're going to put out. So if you need to put out a 1/4 inch, you can enter a 1/4 inch of water, and it's going to give you how long you're going to need to irrigate with that. Or if you just need to put an 8-hour shot on, not a problem. You can do that, no problem. Same thing with fertigation. Choose your different fertilizer, your different tanks, insert those, and you can enter multiple fertilizer injections throughout an irrigation. We can also do the same exact thing with pH control and irrigate to a certain set point. So the biggest part of our drop control software is our programs and templates. So our template is what's happening throughout the day. That's what we've got right here. So it's a schedule, from 8 o'clock in the morning, 6 a.m., whenever you want to start, all the way till the day ends. And the program is setting how long you want that to happen every single day. Or you can skip days using without irrigation, skip 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It's really customizable to whatever the grower wants. So we've got a lot of guys who will create a template and program and set it for 2 weeks. They get a 24-hour notification that it's going to end. They just reset it and you're good to go. Here's the daily view. So from midnight all the way to 11 p.m., we've got the schedule here. We can see that these are fertilizer injections just by the color. So we have the green color. Follow the green legend down here that you can see below. And you can see how many different irrigations, which blocks they're going to be in, the different schedules versus what actually happened, and then you've got a differential. So up top is what was scheduled, down below is what actually happened in the field. So we're giving you some operational feedback, confirming that the pump actually turned on, the valves opened, and everything irrigated correctly. Then we have a weekly view. So from Monday all the way to Sunday, we actually give with this scheduled irrigation button right here. If you were to click that on a Monday, you can actually post the irrigation schedule just in the shop so that your irrigator knows what's going on, which valves are going to be open, which blocks are going to be irrigating for how long. And now we can see that on a weekly schedule. We also do different flow meter readings. So right here, we're looking at your accumulated volume for this period in the black blocks. And then we have our different flow meter readings. Our red line is then tracking how many acre feet of water we've been putting on throughout the season. And at the end of the season, you can always download a full report. You'll get how many irrigations you did, as well as the total acre feet. And that's using this tool right here. So I've got my total acre feet with my certain amount of irrigation events and my custom start and end date. So from August to October, I can see how much irrigation and how many things have gone on my ranch. We also have a mobile app. So using that map right there, we can see which blocks are dry just by using different icons, see the total amount of volume and different charts. So I can see here, I've got these 4 blocks irrigating, all letting me know that by this icon that's appeared. Then I've got my soil moisture analysis, my irrigation analysis, and even my different zones where I've had either based on a pressure switch, so actual pressure within the line, or by the automation. So reading a flow meter, reading pressure transducers, confirming that I've got water running, and it's all good to go. Then I've got different API integrations. So like I said before, we have over 5. So now we keep growing with that. So other companies that are providing a service, whether it's irrigation recommendations, water reporting, weather reporting, etc. So we're still growing. And if you have any questions about the API integrations, you can definitely ask me at the end of this presentation. So here's just some basic strategies that we've seen growers use automation for in terms of like efficiency. So right here, we've got per variety irrigation. So every other valve or every other row, they had a different valve placed connected to a sub-main or main line that was able to be turned on. So you're irrigating your nonpareils while you're harvesting your other varietals in the field. You can see here, they've got the different blocks planned out with different nodes per every other valve so that they can irrigate, the certain variety that are pertaining to that phenological stage. Here we've got just some pressure transducers that we set up at every other valve just to confirm and give some operational feedback of what's happening and that pressures are correct and we're maintaining a good amount of pressure throughout the field. Then we've got valve sequential operation. So the big problem here was they had some guy going out in the field, manually irrigating by turning on 4 valves. Then he would have to go down the field, open 4 more valves, drive back and close the other 4. So you can already know that there's going to be a lot of operational issues in the field with pressure differentials. So what they did was they used the automation to schedule 4 at a time. So now I've got 4 going here, but once this one ends, this one starts. Once this one ends, this one starts. Just so we're always keeping 4 valves open at a time. Then we've got the results from that same project. So this is before the automation. 2019 was the first year, and then the second year right here, we can see the uniformity and vigor in that field drastically increased. Here's some strategies for water conservation. So going more into the pulse irrigating and utilizing that automation system to its fullest. This was a case study we had a few years ago back in Madera, so on 170 acres of almonds, with a couple different varieties, using 60 different valves, 2 pumps with subsurface drip. He actually lost a well in the middle of the season and had to adapt from 1,000 to 500 to 600 gallons per minute. So here is his irrigation schedule. You can see it's pulse irrigation. So from midnight all the way to the end of the day, it's having over 8 irrigations. And based on the age of the trees or the phenological stage or varietals, you know, you could be scheduling out these trees a little bit differently. So it's an extremely intense irrigation method. That is pulse or high frequency irrigation. You're constantly checking your weather, you're checking your evapotranspiration, and mainly checking your soil moisture. So he's looking at his depths here with the first, couple feet, and then that's pretty much it. You're not really seeing anything below 16 or 22 inches. So keeping the roots wet, but maintaining that amount of moisture. We actually had a visit out to the field with UCA&R and the Almond Board. They actually visited in 2018. You can see right here, he's got no runoff or ponding. There's nothing there. The trees are pretty much green year round. Saved 30% of water while maintaining his acreage, his acre average with about 3,000 pounds to the acre. Same thing with time savings. He's not having to go out in the field and change a bunch of stuff around. He's doing it all either from the office, from his phone, and just scheduling out irrigations for the week. The next one, we've got irrigation management with some telemetry. So same exact thing, maybe not pulse irrigating, more so irrigating based on the soil profile. So this certain case study was comparing a first leaf, 2 different first leaf projects, one in 2017, one in 2019. And with the one in 2019, you know, that's where you have the telemetry, you have the automation. In 2017, we didn't. So you're irrigating here based off historical ET data and the soil profile in the orchard. So the 2017 results, 30 to 33 inches applied versus 2019, 20. So you're saving that many inches, getting the same amount of growth, and that's all using either pump and valve automation as well as soil moisture. So Mark Sharpies was the former water resource manager, and he started to irrigate basically based off of the profile. They saved around 1 acre foot of water per acre, which equated to more than 80 acre feet of savings. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your conference, and please reach out to me below with my email or my phone number. Thank you very much, and have a nice conference.
Okay, we're done with the first two, these two vendor presentations. So back to you, Daniele.
Okay, thank you so much, Stu. So I want to provide a little bit of background on the session that we're going to start now, actually explain why we decided to have an international exchange session for sharing experience. First of all, I'd like to point out that, as you all know, California is really the powerhouse of agricultural production basically on an average, 1/3 of the U.S. vegetables and 2/3 of the U.S. fruits and nuts are grown here in our state. In 2018, California agriculture consisted of about 400,000 farms, all in all generating a value of $53.2 billion. So it's a large industry, and every year grows further. And we produce more than 400 crops. However, California agriculture is under some unique pressure. The strongest agricultural regions, so the San Joaquin Valley, the Central Valley, the Central South Coasts, are somehow water limited for many different reasons, even in wet years. And on top of that, there are recurring drought that are increasing in frequency and severity, and also sometimes they are prolonged for several years. On top of this, there are evidence that California agriculture is going towards a more intensification in terms of crops and production and irrigation. And most of the specialty crops are somehow reliant on skilled labor for water management, irrigation management, and nutrient management. And there's quite a bit of labor shortages for these crops. On top of this, there's a changing climate and extreme weather events that are somehow posing unprecedented risk to crop production. Population, it keeps increasing at a sharp rate, and this means also that the urban areas are increasing and the other sectors increase their water demand. So there's a increasingly growing water demand by the urban, peri-urban, industrial, environmental sector. And on top of that, there's actually a progressive shrink on agricultural lands being available for agricultural production. So this unique pressure are somehow common with the many other agricultural production areas worldwide. And so we decided to target a few areas that have similar pressure and similar challenges, and we selected excellent speakers for today's panel. And I'm going to show their headshot picture. Pasquale Staduto will be our first speaker, and he will talk about his experience in water scarcity in North Africa and the Middle East. David Dahl, familiar to many of you in California, is going to talk about nut crop production in the Spain and Portugal. Elias Ferreres, so some of you are also familiar with Elias. He will talk about fruit trees and nut crop production in Mediterranean region. And Luis Octavio Lagos will talk about the coping with the water limitation for horticultural production in Chile. So I encourage all of the speakers to start their cameras in their mic so they can say a few words to the audience, and then we go into their presentation. Please, Pasquale, if you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Daniele. Good morning, everybody. My name is Pasquale Staduto. I'm an agronomist as a training, initiated in Italy and then followed by graduate studies exactly at University of California, where I got my master in water science and my PhD in soil and plant water relations. And that was very pivotal to my international career. And now I'm basically retired from the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And I'm attending the conference from southern Italy. I would like to say that I always maintained, let's say, a relationship with UC Davis staff. With this legacy, I'm very happy to be here with you and look forward for possible future collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasquale. David, do you want to say a few words before we start?
Sure. I'm David Dahl. I am currently in Évora, Portugal, which is in the south central region of Portugal, also known as Alentejo. I worked for UCANR for over 10 years as a farm advisor and made the move over to Portugal in 2018 to work on an almond and specialty crop development within this region. As many of you probably know, there's a lot of similarities between Portugal and California, but I think there's some things that you'll be able to pull from our experience, as the weather here is a lot more like Northern California rather than the San Joaquin Valley. And probably to add to that is we tend to have a little bit more limited water supply in relation to what you're used to in California, as we farm on about 2 to 2.5 acre feet per acre as applied water availability. So those are kind of my preliminary thoughts as you go into the presentation. So thank you, Daniele, for this opportunity.
Thank you, David. Professor Ferreres, your turn.
Good morning. Thank you for having me in the conference. I am Emeritus Professor of the University of Cordoba in Spain, from where I'm talking. I have originally a doctorate degree in agricultural engineering and a PhD in ecology, when ecology was still a science. It's also from UC Davis, like Pasquale. I would like to acknowledge the two persons that I've been working with from California over the years. When Professor Shao, who's also emeritus at UC Davis, who was my mentor or one of my mentors. And the other person is Dr. Dave Goldhammer, with whom I did quite a bit of research over the years on irrigation of tree crops, both in California and here in Spain in collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Elias. Octavio Lagos from Chile, your turn.
Hi, good morning for you and good afternoon for me. So I'm Octavio Lagos, and I'm an irrigation scientist working as an associate professor at the University of Concepcion here in Chile. I have a PhD degree from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. I spent also 1 year with Daniele in UC Davis. Now I'm attending this conference from a small town near the Pacific Ocean in the central zone in Chile. So thank you very much for the invitation. Thanks for the organizer to this conference.
All right, so we're ready to start with the presentation. I'm going to read a little bit of background here. The first presenter is Pasquale Steduto. As he mentioned, he holds a Master of Science in Water Science and a PhD in Soil Plant Water Relationship from the University of California at Davis, and he's been working for more than 25 years on agricultural water use efficiency and water productivity, with a special focus on crop water requirements and crop year response to water under water scarcity condition. In 2003, Pasquale joined the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations as a chief of the Water Resources Development and Management Services. From 2010, he has been the deputy director of the Land and Water Division at FAO. And from 2014 to 2018, he has been the FAO regional program leader and delivery manager of the Regional Water Scarcity Initiative for the Near East and North Africa. Pasquale retired from FAO in 2018 and is presently working as an independent senior water advisor for FAO, ICARDA, the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation in Egypt, and Future Water, which is a consulting group in the Netherlands. Pasquale has authored and co-authored over 100 publications in scientific journals and books. And in 2020, Dr. Steduto has been ranked in the top 1% of the world's highly cited researchers in the Web of Science. Without further ado, I'll ask Stu to launch the recorded video of Pasquale, and then we'll play the other video, and we'll go to the question and answer session. Please put your questions in the chat box and don't use the Q&A because it's somehow a little bit confusing. So we're gonna use the chat box to for the question and answer. Thank you so much. Stuart, whenever you're ready.
I would like to thank the Executive Director of the California Irrigation Institute, Ms. Catherine Chandler, and along with Daniele Zaccaria and the other members of the Board of Directors of the Institute for their kind invitation, which will allow me to share part of the experience derived from the work program of the FAO Regional Initiative on Water Scarcity. The aim of my presentation is to provide some insight in coping with water limitation and to offer some solution in terms of capacity development. The region I'm referring to is the Near East and North Africa, where a quite diversified agricultural water management reality exists, going from a large share of rain-fed agriculture in the northwest, like Morocco, Algeria, and Mauritania, to Egypt, where virtually no agriculture can exist without irrigation, mostly from the Nile River, to the Gulf country, where the major source of water is fossil groundwater, and agriculture has very limited contribution to the self-sufficiency rate of this country's food demand. Iran represents a special case where the international political circumstances push toward as much self-sufficiency as possible, with a dramatic impact on water resources. In one way or another, all the countries of the region share common challenges of water scarcity. When looking at the renewable water resources per capita among the various regions of the world, the Near East and North Africa is the one with the lowest amount. Furthermore, more than 60% of the water resources are transboundary or shared by at least two countries. One other striking expression of water scarcity in the region is the fast depletion of groundwater resources due to over-abstraction relatively to the annual recharge. In this picture, you can see that how all the countries in very dark color are abstracting at more than 100% of the annual recharge. In the case of Morocco, for instance, major aquifers are all continuously lowering their level at a relatively fast rate. Jordan is abstracting up to 215% of the mean annual recharge in the Manzarka Basin, that is one of the major aquifers in the country. Iran has even recently reached an annual abstraction of 50 billion cubic meters, corresponding to more than half of the total annual water withdrawal. Among the major drivers for such a water scarcity situation in this region and its intensification over time, there are the demography. The region, in fact, has one of the highest population growth rate in the world, setting now around 2% annual. The food insecurity, being the country of the region highly dependent on import, they found themselves vulnerable during the food crisis of 2008-2009, when food prices rise significantly and pushed for more internal production. Then the climate change, which has affected the country of the region, particularly those under with the rain-fed agriculture, as the variability and the non-predictability of the events has generated a reduction of supply in agricultural commodity. And all of this has led to unsustainable policies, higher self-sufficiency rate in agricultural product, the unregulated expansion of irrigation and its modernization as a response to the water scarcity, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, and then also energy subsidies that have been implemented for pumping, and this has accelerated the groundwater overdrafting. Against this backdrop, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, has elaborated a specific work program and framework on water scarcity that is dedicated specifically to the Near East and North Africa region. And the major objective was to coordinate efforts of all actors working in the region, concentrate the financial resources toward major scarcity challenges, prioritize also actions, and establishing a platform, learning from each other experience between countries of the region, and where possible, scaling up successful cases. The major focus area of the initiatives is mostly on sustainability through policy coherence, governance, and interministerial coordination, strategic planning, adoption of a solid water accounting system to generate the evidence base, and halting groundwater overdrafting. In terms of supply side options, we have the water harvesting and non-conventional water resources like treated wastewater and desalination. On the demand side, we have increased water efficient productivity and reducing of water consumption. And lastly, there is always the climate change with the action in adaptation and drought management. Of course, several institutional partners working in the region are contributing to the water scarcity initiative of FAO. Among them, we have other UN organizations, research center, and financing institution. Then at country level, multidisciplinary teams steer the initiative, and the country stakeholders like Ministry, Extension Services, Grow and Water User Association are among the beneficiaries of the Water Scarcity Initiative. Among the various actions implemented by the Water Scarcity Initiative, I would like now to focus on one that I consider most relevant, that is the basic rules for water sustainability. The empirical evidence have shown that the majority of the agricultural investment in the region are allocated to irrigation modernization with upgrade of the delivery system and on the farm irrigation method through improved technology. Unfortunately, this step alone is not only insufficient to ensure water sustainability, but even intensify water scarcity. To halt water scarcity, there is a need to set the limits of water consumption and manage the allocation accordingly. Furthermore, to have a quantitative base for setting limits and allocation and to monitor the results of the implementation, a solid water accounting system is required. Thus, we have here that the right sequence of ruling out water sustainability is to get first a water accounting in place, then you set the limit of water consumption, and only after you maximize the net benefit of allocated water. The reality instead showed always that the countries in the region implement mostly step 3. Let me then expand a bit on these 3 steps. Regarding water accounting, it can be defined according to FAO as the systematic quantitative assessment of the status and trends in water supply, demand, distribution, accessibility, and use in specified domain that informs water science, management, and governance to support sustainable development outcomes for society and the environment. It can include the water quality aspect and the scenario analysis to elaborate prospecting water use. Furthermore, we introduced largely the use of remote sensing determination of evapotranspiration as one of the major variables of the water accounting, together with assessment of its uncertainty. An important dimension of the water accounting is in the determination of the various fractions of water uses, which include the consumptive and non-consumptive use, the non-consumptive also indicated as a region flow, and then for the consumptive you have the beneficial and non-beneficial fraction, where for beneficial we consider the transpiration of crops, while the non-beneficial is the soil and free water surface evaporation or the transpiration of weeds. The non-consumptive use of return flow as the recoverable and non-recoverable fraction. As you can see, we can include the quality in the water accounting, considering the initial indicators, and then what is the quality indicators in the recoverable or non-recoverable fraction. After the different uses, then we have the change in storage that can be seen in reservoirs, groundwater, snow volume, or soil moisture. It is important to recognize that consumption and renewability of natural resources represent the binding constraints of sustainability. Over time, the consumption tended to increase continuously because of the increased demand, increased development, etc. And at some point, a cap should be established. Furthermore, the withdrawal from the various water users can be set at different percentage of renewability. For instance, you may set to withdraw only 20% of the renewable water resources over a given time period, generally the annual time frame, and this is very conservative. Or you can start to go toward 40% withdrawal of the renewable water resources, and you start to leave the limit of low risk for sustainability. There are countries, in fact, in the region that withdraw up to 80% of the renewable water resources, and then this brings them into very high risk. Therefore, to retain a feasible degree of sustainability, we need to be within the safe operational boundaries of water consumption and renewability. The search for reducing the water consumption has pushed for the adoption of water-saving technology in irrigation, but with a substantial misunderstanding on the meaning of water saving. For one, a rebounding effect establishes. This is also indicated as a Jevons paradox, and it occurs when technology progress increases the efficiency with which a resource is used, but the rate of consumption of that resources rises because of increasing demand. Improved efficiency lowers the relative cost of using resources, which increases the quantity demanded. Moreover, it accelerates economic growth, further increasing the demand for resources. From the individual farmer perspective, high-tech irrigation makes water more profitable. It can irrigate a larger area, obtain higher yields, switch to higher value crops. In other words, water demand and consumption increases. With the final results, the water scarcity intensify, and this is exactly the opposite of what was initially expected by the introduction of irrigation technology. Thus, there is a different perspective in terms of water saving between the farm scales and the basin scales. Essentially, the runoff and deep percolation considered water losses by the farmer are not necessarily losses at the basin scale, and therefore water saving at farm scale are not necessarily water saving at the basin scale. In some countries of the region, notably is the case of Egypt, a reconciliation between different scales was possible through the use of water accounting that could disclose a real water saving at the national level and therefore a more commensurate water resources allocation to agriculture. Within the allocated water, we have the third step where agriculture should be moving towards the adoption of technological and management advancement, increasing agricultural production while using the same or less amount of water. That is, increasing the water productivity. In fact, we can see that there is a scope for increasing water productivity at biophysical level in both rain-fed and irrigated agriculture, as well as at economic level. If we look at the emerging results in the NENA region, we can observe that several countries are finally conceiving the importance of setting the sustainable limits of water consumption. Agriculture, in fact, is receiving less and less fresh water. For instance, Jordan irrigated agriculture is down now to around 50% of total freshwater resources allocation. No more irrigation is allowed if not through recycling of treated wastewater. In Egypt, for instance, is setting the limits of water allocation to agriculture down to 70% within the next 20 years, departing from a present allocation of around 85%. Also, cities along the coast are obliged to desalt water, and they have established an institutional water accounting units within the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. In Morocco, there is a series of measures to incentivize the reduction of groundwater abstraction, and they are also pay attention to the virtual water export. The League of Arab States has established also a joint ministerial high-level committee where there are both Ministry of Agriculture and Water for policy coherence. I would like then heading to conclude my presentation by highlighting some key lessons from the water scarcity initiatives. In terms of governance, there should be a strong coordination between institutions, ideally towards one single water authority. The least the institutional fragmentation, the highest the likelihood for sustainability. And this has been actually implemented in Israel. The sectoral policy needs to be consistent and harmonized with each other. Water is a multi-purpose resource, and the optimal allocation between sectors is the result of a dialogue between stakeholders, private and public, governmental and non-governmental. Climate change remains a great hazard for the region, and therefore strategic and prospective water resources allocation, including risk management due to climate change, are required. The adoption of water accounting at different scales and nested in a comprehensive basin or national system, which may include also virtual water trade, will make the processes transparent, avoiding also unintended consequences of the various decisions. In terms of research, development, and education, we need to consider that the remote sensing determination and various modeling requires more testing, validation, and calibration on the ground. The recent development in information communication technology are providing new approaches for progress in water resource management and agriculture. For instance, the use of crowdsourcing, people in the field, the farmers, and Internet of Things through their chip sensor and telemetry are and can be used to maintain the two-way communication between modeling and reality. Essentially, the modeling and the reality check can be much more in a continuum with the recent technology development. Further analytics in deficit irrigation and water productivity are required. looking at baseline, potential gap, biophysical, economical dimension, and along the value chain with the insight in practice and technologies. Finally, modern extension services are extremely valuable interfaces between research and development. Thus, it is important to lever on the extension service to accelerate the progress in sustainable farming. I and other colleagues at UC Davis and at the Cooperative Extension are exploring opportunities for collaboration to transpose some valuable international experience for the benefit of the Californian agriculture. And with this, I would like to close my presentation and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Pasquale, for your enlightening presentation. Our next speaker is David Dole. David holds a Bachelor in Plant Biology at Purdue University and a Master of Science in Plant Pathology from the University of California, Davis. He has been working for 10 years as a farm advisor for the University of California Cooperative Extension. And in that capacity, David worked with farmers in the Central Valley of California for troubleshooting problems and conducting research on almonds, walnuts, and pistachio. In this position, he would visit nearly 200 operations and deliver about 35 presentations annually, as well as publish regularly in scientific journals. Many of his field observation and research findings and lessons learned have been shared and continue to be shared in his online platform named The Almond Doctor. In November 2018, David moved to Portugal to work as the lead developer for Rota Unica almonds. In his current position, his task is to develop California-style almonds plantation within the Alentejo region. With that, I will give the floor to Stuart to launch David's presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm David Dahl, currently the General Manager for Rota Unica Agriculture. Some of you may remember me from my previous position as the Tree Nut Farm Advisor for Merced County with the University of California Cooperative Extension Service. Today I'm going to talk about my experience in managing development of almonds within Iberia, and particularly focusing on some of the climate and irrigation issues related to that development. I'm hoping along the way to draw some parallels to California to help you understand that although there are some similarities, there also are some differences. I thought a logical place to start is to provide an overview of the climate of Iberia. Now, for definition's sake, Iberia is the combination of Spain and Portugal, and it forms the peninsula on the southwest corner of Europe, with France located to the northeast once you cross the Pyrenees. The climate of Iberia is classified as Mediterranean as well as oceanic. The Mediterranean climate means it has hot summers with most of the rain falling in the winter months, and the oceanic is very similar in precipitation, except for it tends to be a little bit cooler due to the influence of the Atlantic Ocean in the northern part of the country. Now, most of the almond production is based in what we call the central part of Spain and Portugal, which is typically Mediterranean climate. But we also see plantings along the coast near Murcia, as well as in the north central part of the country near Zaragoza. These areas of production have lower water demand than what we typically see in California, somewhere around between 42 and 52 inches of total water demand. And due to precipitation, applications are much less, ranging from 24 to 30 inches. The rainfall patterns across Iberia also vary. And this is similar to what we tend to see on the West Coast. The gradient tends to move from the southeast corner, which very low rainfall, around 200 millimeters, to the northwest corner with very high amounts of rain, somewhere around 80 inches total for the year. And this is due to that oceanic influence from the Atlantic, which is just to the north. The mountains also receive substantial amount of snow, which then of course is melted and provides runoff into the rivers during the spring. Now, most of the tree nut production areas within Spain and Portugal are in these regions that receive somewhere around 400 to 600 millimeters of water per year, this is around 16 to 24 inches of total rainfall. The rain as it falls into 13 major river basins within the Iberian Peninsula. Perennial agriculture occurs in about 6 of these, with 3 within Spain and 3 basins shared between the Spain and Portugal border. As you can imagine, this creates some tension between the 2 countries in regards to government regulations. Now, the remaining basins are utilized for specialty crops, and overall crop diversity across the Iberian Peninsula is very similar to what we see within California. The irrigation infrastructure across Spain and Portugal differs dependent upon the terrain. In low-lying flat areas, there's gravity-fed water, which is open channel, very similar to what we experience and see in California. As the terrain becomes more hilly or more undulating, we start to see pressurized systems that deliver water to the field. These systems tend to be more modern, and of course, there's an increased expense to the water delivered to the field. There's not a lot of reliance within both Spain and Portugal on wells. There's a lot of regulations associated with it, and this includes licensing, the development of the well, the inability to extract groundwater from certain basins, as well as very low flow within wells after they are established. So we're not capped just based upon a regulation, we're also capped on the ability for that well to produce water. Lastly, there is some desalination within Spain, and that's mostly used for vegetable crop production near Almeria in the southeastern part. Now let's shift our focus to Portugal. Within Portugal, there are 5 major production areas that vary in both climate as well as in rainfall. In the south, we have a semi-tropical area that receives roughly 20 inches of rain, more or less. And as we move north, we see an increasing amount of rain and a decreasing in temperature until we arrive in the north, which is a relatively mild region that receives about 44 inches of rain between October and June. Most of the agricultural production within Portugal is based around 3 river basins, including the Douro River, which is known for its grapes, the Tejo River, which is known for specialty crop production, including tomatoes, walnuts, apples, and so forth, and the Guadiana, which irrigates most of Alentejo, and this provides the production for olives as well as almonds within the region. Interestingly, farming in Alentejo is a lot like farming in the Sacramento Valley of California. And when we overlay the maps, we can see that the degrees latitude actually line up as such. The production area within Alentejo starts somewhere around Sacramento and extends up to Chico. And as we move into the northern production areas, we're actually are approaching the California-Oregon border. In contrast, the large major almond production area within California, within the San Joaquin Valley, is located at the southern edge of Portugal and extends into North Africa. Now, this degrees of latitude impacts the amount of light that's received on a daily basis, especially through the growing season, in the spring and fall in particular, which influences both the temperature as well as the humidity experienced during these times. I think it's easy to draw similarities between Alentejo and the Central Valley. In fact, we probably could even say it's Portugal's Central Valley. It has a dry Mediterranean climate, meaning that it has high heat during the summer, and as well as most of the rainfall tends to fall between September and May, more or less. The major difference is there's a lot of terrain elevation changes. So we start off at sea level, roughly 0 feet, and then we have hilltops that tend to extend up to 2,500 feet above sea level. Now this region is dry, as I mentioned. It has very limited water basins, and as such, it's serviced through an irrigation district known as ADIA. Now ADIA manages the Alqueva Reservoir, which is on the Guadiana River, and it forms a reservoir about the size of Lake Oroville. This provides water to roughly 200,000 people, 250,000 people, irrigating about 400,000 acres of crops. The water is delivered pressurized through closed pipe systems, and the pressure can range from 1 to 3 bars depending upon parcel size. Larger parcels tend to have what they call unpressurized water, which is delivered between 1 to 2 bars, and smaller parcels tend to have water delivered at a higher pressure between 3 and 4 bars. And this, of course, is provided as a guarantee or a tag on the specific hydrant. The amount of water that's provided to the field is really managed by pipe sizing, and this prevents your ability to irrigate beyond the respective footprint that you have within the parcel size. The cost structure is very similar to California, roughly about $45 per acre foot for the price of water within an unpressurized system, and of course various fees for standby, environmental management, etc. The major difference is pumping costs within Portugal are much higher, and energy is about 35% higher than what is typically observed in California. Now, as I mentioned, the soil conditions within Alentejo are different, and a lot of this has to do with the terrain changes that we tend to see. We see a lot of highly eroded hillsides with a lot of layering within the soils, especially in the valley. And these soils have been farmed for thousands of years, typically to grains, and therefore they tend to be relatively nutrient poor, very low potassium, very low phosphorus, and many are acidic due to just the lack of inputs onto the fields to maintain good agronomic conditions. So we tend to see a lot more application of soil amendments as well as deep ripping to break up some of these layers to help us maintain good water infiltration and other agronomic practices required for almond farming. The terrain features impact how we irrigate in Portugal. It's very common to have very significant elevation changes across the field, anywhere from 30 to 40 meters from the top to bottom end. And all this has to be considered within the irrigation design. To manage this, we're utilizing smaller sets, typically 5 to 10 acres in size, using flexible polyethylene pipe for secondaries, as well as have automated control valves to help us manage the site-specific variability. And of course, all these systems are utilizing pressure drip with pressure compensating emitters, with very few micro sprinkler systems found within the region. Automation is considered essential within Iberia, and this has a lot to do with the terrain. The downside of this is that we're fully reliant on having a pressurized system, meaning that we're pulling water from the hydrants or from a charged reservoir in order to keep the water flowing into the system. The good thing is that since so much of this is used, the systems are a lot cheaper to install than what I typically have observed in California. We're seeing these systems typically as mono cables, meaning that we're putting a cable along the top of the pipe as we install to plug into the valve. Now, we do have radio controlled or cellular valve controlled bodies, but it's not as common just due to the increased expense associated with it. And where we do see our point of radio control is at the actual pump station, where we're able to access it with mobile technology to turn on and off the pumps. Now, all stations that we're seeing in Portugal are utilizing VFDs, and that's really just to deal with the fact that we're having variable amounts of water being applied across the field at any given time. The water-related challenges we have within Portugal are very similar to California. They mostly deal with weather variability as well as water management. So we have essentially a natural factor that includes decreased winter chill, increased intensity rainfall events, as well as drought. And you can see some of the impacts of the increased precipitation that we're seeing with relatively large storms that tend to come in and drop several inches of rain at a given moment. Now, the water management is something we control as a society. And in Portugal, I think it's a little bit more complicated just due to the changing government regulations. There's a lot of lack of consistency, a lot more favorable environmental policies, and just a lack of enforcement of agreements between water treaties between Spain and Portugal create some inconsistencies in the amount of water available. This is then coupled with our mostly irrigation districts that are managed by political appointees. And this may mean that it may not have the farmer's aspect or the farmer's perspective as their top priority. And it can lead to decisions that maybe aren't taking into account what's best for the end users of that amount of water. How we manage these challenges on the farm is not necessarily unique. As everyone knows, agriculture is about water, and therefore every action that we have on a farm keeps our water resources in mind. We subscribe to the permaculture belief of slowing it, spreading it, and sinking the water into the ground. And to do this, we utilize 3 strategies that start with farm development, include crop selection, and as well as utilization of the better farming practices to help us maximize our water resource. Some of the on-farm strategies we have to mitigate weather risk is very similar to California. Reservoirs, wells, interconnected systems help us essentially increase the volume of water that's available to use on our farms. Due to the rainfall, however, we have some different practices, such as deep ripping to break up the limiting layers to allow for better drainage, cover crops to help slow water and reduce erosion, contour leveling and cutting berms to spread that water in order to get it into the soil. And then we have as well as soil amendments to help increase infiltration, especially calcium-containing soil amendments. One thing that's a little bit unique to Portugal is we tend not to fully develop our farm footprints. This has a lot to do with environmental policies established by the EU, but it gives us the ability to have an increase in the amount of water available to apply. So essentially we're only developing 85% of our farm, but we still have 100% of the water, and we concentrate that water onto areas that in time of need. Crop selection is one of the primary means we can use to optimize our farm water use. We screen our crops for high water use efficiency, trying to find somewhere around 0.85 liters of water requirement for every kilocalorie produced, which is essentially 15% more efficient than the world average. This includes almonds, pistachios, as well as other grains that we look to utilize. We also, when choosing a perennial crop, tend to look for trees that we can utilize deficit irrigation strategies without taking a severe impact on yield. Now, when it comes to farming practices, they tend to vary. But one thing that we tend to value a lot here is that first timing of irrigation. Due to the amount of spring rain that we tend to have, we may find that we don't need to apply our first irrigation until the end of April or into early to mid-May. And this impacts how we fertilize, including the use of granular applications through the spring. To help us with this, we utilize modern technology, which includes aerial imagery such as AirWatch, aerobotics, soil sensors like Centec sensors, as well as tree monitoring, stem water potential, calipers, etc. We try to utilize a sustained deficit irrigation program to give us more flexibility in our water use, and we target essentially 85% of the estimated ETC of our almonds to maintain the highest water use efficiency as possible. Soil amendments help us maintain water infiltration. We reduce infield compaction, and of course, utilize cover crops to maintain soil organic matter as well as reduce tillage. In conclusion, the challenges in Portugal are very similar to California. I think the biggest difference between the two systems from my observation is the ability to have more site-specific control of the irrigation and water applications within our installed systems here. These smaller subunits as well as automation really help us target water and nutrients to specific soil types and allow us to work with that system to reduce water applications by several percent depending upon crop need or potential irrigation strategy. I think this would have a lot of value coming into California as one, to improve distribution uniformity, two, to provide a little bit more refined control. Overall, it's been a good experience to be here. And of course, the change from the technical side to ranch management has been challenging. I've learned a lot, I felt, in the process of installing systems and utilizing it to grow trees over the past couple of years. And I hope many of you have found some benefit in comparing and contrasting the two systems. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, David, for your very detailed presentation. Our next speaker is Elias Ferreres Castiel. Professor Ferreres is a professor emeritus at the University of Cordoba in Spain and senior research scientist at the Institute for Sustainable Agriculture of the Scientific Research Council of Spain. He has a doctorate degree from the Polytechnical University of Madrid and a PhD from the University of California, Davis. He has worked for 6 years as the irrigation and surface water specialist for the University of California Cooperative Extension, and he was based at the Department of Land, Air, and Water Resources at UC Davis. His research has been focusing on the sustainability of water-limited agriculture, and he has covered many topics related to agricultural water management and conservation, including deficit irrigation. He has published more than 150 journal articles and book chapters that have received over 25,000 citations, Google Scholar citations. He has substantial international experience in advising governments of over 20 different countries and international organizations such as the World Bank, UNESCO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. He has been chief editor of the Journal of Irrigation Science, and he is co-author of the FAO publication on crop yield response to water. which was published in 2012, for which he led the section on tree crops and vines. With that, I'll give the floor to Dr. Elias Perez's presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to thank the organizers and particularly Dr. Daniele Zaccaria for inviting me to give this talk on deficit irrigation of Mediterranean tree crops. Modern agricultural research was invented more than 200 years ago in Europe, mainly in England and Germany. But really the research on irrigation of orchard crops started in California more than 100 years ago. One key person was Frank B. Meyer, who worked for many decades with Hendrickson on irrigation of tree crops, and was followed by other early professors of the Department of Irrigation, later being Water Science and Engineering, like Donin, Henderson, Hagan. Yurio was in the Department of Pomology. They all worked at some time on irrigation of tree crops. Really, the development of California fruit tree production took place under ample water supply. There was plenty of water for irrigation, even though research demonstrated that irrigation frequency could be decreased and therefore labor costs also decreased if you allow the crop to extract water down to PWP. That was one of the main goals of B. Meyer's research. However, things changed when the drought of 1976 and 77 took place, two dry winters side by side. And that caused that there was insufficient irrigation water, forcing the farmers to use less water than what they were used to, even less water than the crops would take. That led to the development of deficit irrigation. What do we call deficit irrigation? Well, deficit irrigation is the application of water below the crop water requirements. Crop water requirements are quantified by determining the crop evapotranspiration. And the response to deficit irrigation is shown in this generalized relationship for the corn. Here you can see that at the maximum ET, you obtain the maximum yield. And when you decrease the evapotranspiration below its maximum, the yield decreases. The response to applied water is not linear like the response to ET, but it's curvilinear, as you see there, because there are losses that increase as you increase the application of water, losses due to percolation and lack of exact distribution. Now, it is possible that if you apply less water than that is required, the crop will extract some from the stored soil water, and at the end of the season, the evapotranspiration, the consumed water, would be the same with deficit irrigation than with full irrigation. In that situation, you don't have any yield losses and you don't really save any water. You save irrigation water because you use some of the rainfall that has been stored in the profile. So that's one approach. However, if you apply less water than needed and the crop cannot extract the balance from the soil, then you have a reduction in production. Now, we know that deficit irrigation is done inadvertently when ET is not known, or sometimes it's done by design, because in order to spread out the developed water in many world areas like India and Pakistan, the networks were designed to supply only a fraction of the water needs. This was also happening in other places where the ET was not well calculated using the Thornweight equation to calculate ET, which underestimated the actual water use of crops. Now, it was in that period of 1976-77 when deficit irrigation was first considered for tree crops in the American West because of the lack of water. Now, there are other risks in the case of tree crops when you apply less water than the requirements, which is the impact on subsequent year yields, and even the livelihood of the plantation may be at risk if your deficit is too severe. So some research started at that time. Yurio, Jim Buttel, and myself started an experiment on peaches and plums, but those were never published, mainly because we only ran it for 3 years, and you need to have long-term experiments to really characterize the response of these 3 crops to deficit irrigation. The 3 crops must adapt to the deficit irrigation regime to exhibit its true response. Now, what is a response function in 3 crops? We have seen that the response to reduced water consumption in maize and other main annual crops is linear, but the response to deficit irrigation in 3 crops is not linear, it's curvilinear. Most of the 3 crops, not all, but most of them have a curvilinear relation between yield and ET. And this is a typical response. This is on applied water, but you find it also in ET for apricots. Measurements done in Southeast Spain by Perez Pastor and others, where you see that the crop is curvilinear, the line is curvilinear, and if you take the derivative of that curve, you get the maximum marginal water productivity, which is a return in kilograms per millimeter of water used, or in English units, the pounds of fruit per inch of water used. You see that at the first step, the marginal water productivity between the first 2 points is about 0.17 kilograms per millimeter, while as you go down in the line, along the line, and reduce the water further, the productivity increases, and for the second step, you get almost twice as much in return per millimeter of water used on the average. For the English units, this amount is equivalent to 9.5 pounds per inch, or 17 pounds per inch for 0.31. So you increase the water productivity as you decrease the irrigation water. Unfortunately, the curve shape is not applicable to different production systems and locations, because the timing and severity of water deficits affects this shape. This has given way to different approaches to do deficit irrigation, like regulated deficit irrigation, sustained deficit irrigation, etc. Here is one example in almonds why deficit irrigation has to be designed properly. This is work done by Dave Goldhammer in Southern California in Kern County, where 2 different responses are seen. On one hand, if you bias your deficit irrigation to the post-harvest period, you can really hurt production relative to a deficit irrigation regime where you spread out the deficit through the whole station. So it is critical that we design deficit irrigation according to the developmental responses and the crop responses to water deficits. These responses have been compiled in a publication that was done by Pasquale Steduto, who has participated in this seminar, Professor Xiao of UC Davis, myself, and Dirk Rice from Leuven, University of Leuven in Belgium. There is a section on the yield response to water of fruit trees and vines that I led, that has the compilation of the water production functions of the different, about 12 species and main fruit tree species, up to the date when the publication was put out in 2012. There's been more results in recent years. Now, in that publication, we asked the question, can deficit irrigation save water and maintain yield in 3 crops? Well, the answer depends on the species and the situation. Here is one example where deficit irrigation was successful in saving water. When this experiment lasted 5 years, we never published it. We obtained a reduction in water use of 20% in consumed water, 33% in irrigation water, with a negligible reduction in yield and value in the case of regulated deficit irrigation. Now, if you did a different type of deficit irrigation, you got a yield reduction of 7%, which was much more severe in terms of value of the crop because the fruit size was impacted in the deficit irrigation treatment. So if you do the regulated deficit irrigation in peach, under many but not all situations, you can save water, actually save consumed water, save DT, and maintain yield. And now I will move into a case study, which is the olive response to irrigation. This is a typical picture of the Mediterranean olive production. This is southern Spain. Olive is planted throughout. Spain has about 7.5 million acres of olives, and traditionally was grown under rain-fed conditions. Wide spacings and pruning help obtain reasonable yields under rain-fed conditions. Now, about 20 years ago, we determined the response function to irrigation water. In this case, it's the response function fruit yield to ET. The line represents results in Andalusia, and the other points are from experiments in other varieties and different countries in the Mediterranean. And from that curve, as you can see, it's not linear, but it could be linear. You can determine what is the economic optimum by, again, taking the derivative of the curve that is the same that you see here, and obtaining the marginal water productivity. This is, the curve was a second-degree polynomial, so the derivative is a straight line that shows that you can get about half a kilogram or a pound of oil per cubic meter when you are irrigating at 50% ET, 50-60% ET, and that water productivity goes down to nearly zero when you're approaching full water supply. So because water productivity was so high with limited amounts of water, farmers developed an irrigation approach in which they applied very limited amounts of water to the trees that were already under rain-fed irrigation, and got a boost in productivity. That success in irrigation with little amounts and much higher income led to an explosion of the irrigated acreage in Spain since 1995, 25 years ago. It took off, and the acreage was increased to 8 times in the last 30 years. Now we have more than 2 million acres of irrigated olives. 95% or more are under drip irrigation, but more than 80% are under deficit irrigation, which is quite severe, as I will show. But the expansion, of course, led to stretching the water supply and to a growth of irrigation acreage beyond probably the level of sustained water supplies that we have. For you to have an idea of what the differences are between Spain and California, I have used this table that was published recently in a comparison by Berbel and Esteban, made a few adjustments on the numbers. And the average rainfall, we have more rainfall than California, but the same reservoir capacity, a little less. There's much more water transfer in California than in Spain because your irrigated areas are in the south where rainfall is very small. We use much less water for irrigation. We have about the same irrigation area, 9 million acres or so, but the amount of water that we apply on the average is much less than what you apply. This is a combination of having more rainfall in winter and spring season than you, and also the lack of developed water for further expansion. We have expanded from 3 to 3.7 million in recent years, in the last 15 years or so. So we have much less water for irrigation. 4,200 cubic meters per hectare is about 16 inches, and you are applying like 40 plus. In addition to irrigation, of course, there's been crop intensification. From the wide spacing, we have gone to very high density plantations that, of course, require more irrigation water, and their optimal supply is about twice as much as what is applied to the standard plantations of 200 trees per hectare or 100 trees per acre. This is more like 400 to 600 trees per acre. And about impact, I think it's good to see what has happened to olive oil production in 2 countries that were producing about the same in the 1980s and 1990s. And then the expansion of irrigation took place in Spain, and the evolution has been very different. The trend, we went from 500,000 tons produced in the 80s and 90s to about 1 million soon, over the year 2000. We have reached peaks of 1.8 million tons, 3 times the production of the 80s, while Italy stayed more or less the same. The fluctuations, of course, have much to do with the alternate bearing situation of this crop, which is very prone to alternate bearing. But irrigation is also stabilizing some of that. And we are this year, the production after a bumper crop of last year would be about 1.4 million tons, quite high. And to finalize, let me talk about almonds. The response of almonds has been best characterized by the production function developed by Dave Goldhammer and myself in the southern San Joaquin Valley in a 5-year experiment. This has a slightly different curve, but similar to what you've seen. If you take the derivative of the third-degree polynomial, you get a second-degree polynomial with an optimum level of water productivity. And from that, you can decide where how much water to apply. This curve was obtained for the nonpareil variety in southern San Joaquin Valley, but we have conducted a 6-year experiment on a different variety, hard shell, here in Cordoba, and we have confirmed pretty much the results of this experiment with nonpareil. So to conclude, I would say the deficit irrigation has allowed the expansion of irrigation in 3 crops in the Mediterranean. This expansion continues. It's been very successful in olive. It's now taking place in almond, and pistachio and walnuts may soon follow, but it's limited by the water resources of the area that are really the factor that will determine in the future the expansion of those plantations and the optimum levels of irrigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferreres. It's very enlightening presentation with the detail about how much water per acre or per hectare is consumed in Spain and California. And I was, shocked to see that almost half of the amount you get by with half of the amount that that we normally use in California. Our next speaker is Octavio Lagos, who is an associate professor in the Water Resources Department at the University of Concepcion in Chile. He holds a master's degree in agricultural engineering from the University of Concepcion and a PhD in engineering at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. From 2013 to 2017, Dr. Lagos was the chair of the Water Resources Department for 2 consecutive terms or periods. In 2017 and 18, he spent 1 sabbatical year at the University of California in Davis as a visiting professor, working on evapotranspiration on nut and fruit crops. His research focuses on measuring and modeling evapotranspiration for annual and perennial crops, as well as on remote sensing agriculture and natural resources. He is also responsible for some extension education projects aimed at training small farmers and professionals to manage water resources under drought, climate variability, and climate change scenarios. With that, I'll give the floor to Dr. Lagos' presentation. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank the invitation to this annual conference, and also thanks the organizers, especially Daniele Zaccaria for this invitation. I'm gonna talk today about how Chile is coping with the water limitation. In Chile, we have 5 different areas. In the Norte Grande, where the Atacama Desert is located. Then the Norte Chico, where we have some agricultural areas. The central zone in yellow here is the area where our agriculture is more concentrated. Then we have the south zone and the austral zone. Our Chilean Central Valley is located in this
in this part. And it's very similar to California. We have a mountains, the Andes Mountains in one side, and also we have a coastal mountain near to the ocean. So in this depression in the middle is located this Central Valley. And as I said, our agriculture is concentrated mainly in this area. The climate here is Mediterranean climate with precipitation increasing from the north to the south. In Santiago, for example, we have 300 millimeters of annual precipitation. And in the south part of this region, the annual precipitation is a little more than 1,000 millimeters. So in terms of temperature, the average temperature in summer month is around 20 Celsius degrees, which is 68 Fahrenheit. And in winter is around 10 Celsius degrees. And that is almost constant in all this Central Valley. What types of crops we have? Here I try to show the more relevant horticultural crops in this Central Valley. The total area for orchards is around 344,000 hectares. For vineyards is 150,000 hectares to produce wine and also pisco. In order of magnitude, here we have the table grapes with the 45,000 hectares. Table grapes is grown in the north side mainly. Then walnut is an important crop. Cherry is growing really fast because of the price of these days of cherry. Apple has been important. Avocados also. Hazelnut also is increasing a lot because it doesn't need a lot of labor. Blueberry also is very, very popular. Here we have the evolution of the total area since 2003 to 2018 per species. So we can see an important increment in cherry trees, in walnut orchards, in olives, in blueberry, and also in hazelnut. On contrary, table grapes and avocados are reducing their area due to limitations on water mainly. What areas are showing higher expansions? Basically, in Chile, crops are moving south. Why? Mainly due to there is a good climate, there are availability of soil, and also water is available for irrigation. What crops? You can see here in this figure, cherry trees, again, blueberries, and hazelnut are very popular these days. What are the main challenges for agricultural water management these days? This figure shows the annual mean precipitation from north to south, and we can see the annual total precipitation is around 200 millimeter per year to around 1,200 millimeter per year. This figure is coming from that article that was published in 2019. And this publication is talking about the mega drought that we have since 2010 until this year, basically. Here I have a graph showing the regional precipitation index since 1915 up to 2018. So basically above 100 is above normal, and below 100 is below normal. And you can see since 2010, the precipitation has been very, very low when we compare with the previous year. What happened in 2019? The situation was also difficult. Here in the left figure, I showed the deficit of precipitation in the north part was around 81%, while in the south area, the deficit was 30%. 2020, still we have less precipitation. The deficit reached 30% in the north and around 34% in the south. What happened with the temperature? The graph here also shows the evolution of average annual maximum temperatures in Santiago. So you can see that there is an increase on this temperature too, and this condition also occurs in the whole Central Valley. Here we have the situation for heat waves. So the tendency is to have more heat waves events. This situation is common in all this Central Valley. And the number of cases has been more often during the previous years. What are the consequences of this decrease in precipitation and increase in temperature? The green graph up there is showing the amount of water that is stored in one particular reservoir. And we can see since 2010, there is a decrease in this volume storage. The second one in orange show the static level in meters of one particular deep well. And also there is a reduction or decrease in that static level. In gray, we have the snow line for one basin. The values are in meters above sea level. And we also see during this period, there is a reduction on the altitude of this snow line. And the last one is the river flow for the Maipo Basin, also in cubic meters per second. And there is a clear also reduction on the flow of that particular river during this period. So the impact of that reduction in precipitation and increase in temperature is very important. What other consequences we have? We have more wildfires. Previous the mega drought, in average, we have 40,000 hectares per season. In between 2010 to 2014, this number increased to 70,000, and in 2017, the situation was really, really difficult, and the number of hectares increased to 600,000 hectares affected by wildfires. So also there is an increment on these problems. We have problems also with water scarcity for domestic uses. In 2010, we spent around 500 millions on this problem, and in 2015, the annual cost for this increased to 34,000 million. So also is impacting water for domestic use. What are the national strategies implemented to improve this water productivity or to solve all these problems? Well, our government announced this national plan to construct 26 new dams, 26 new reservoirs. The total cost is around $6,000 million dollar for this plan, and this will benefit around 400,000 hectares. In Chile also, we have this law for the promotion of irrigation and drainage. This is an instrument that through a system of competition can save up to 90% of the total cost of a project. The project can be irrigation infrastructure, can be the construction of deep wells, irrigation systems, new construction, or the improvement of water distribution system like irrigation canals, and the construction of drainage projects. This is a very popular law in Chile. The budget for this year is around 175 million of dollars. So it's very, very popular and very well received by farmers. Here are some examples of local strategies to improve water productivity. In general, at a farm scale, farmers try to improve the water use efficiency using more technologies like more sensors or systems that can be used to control the irrigation system. All this also show the need for more training that is also popular these days. Strategies like irrigation modernization using the law that I presented previously. Practices like regulated deficit irrigation also is very popular. Precision irrigation in some cases. Farmers these days try to change to more valuable crops that use less water. And also the construction of deep wells is very common. Deep wells that can give more security for irrigation. What is the role of universities in these issues? This figure tries to show what normally happens in Chile. When a technology is created, in general, it must go through 3 stages. Knowledge development, normally related to the academia, technology development in collaboration with the industry, and business development. Here, I show 2 examples of how universities interact in this process. The first one is the project CRIAM. It's a water resources center for agriculture and mining, integrated by 3 universities whose purposes is the development of basic science and basic research. The second one is a water technology consortium whose objective is to develop and transfer technology. There are 7 institutions involved in this consortium, and please see that the UC Davis Chile Center is also an important partner. The Water Technology Consortium is not only integrated by these 7 institutions. Also, the private sector is an important partner. The consortium includes a group of companies related to the agriculture production, other group with companies that produce water for domestic use, another group of companies related to technologies for water resources, and another group of water users associations. Also important is the participation of the public sector. Here I have 2 projects under this consortium. One is artificial recharge of groundwater using irrigation channels. The other one is about seawater desalination that use nanofilters with solar energy to produce water for domestic use. Here I have other two developments that try to help in irrigation decisions. One is a map of crop coefficients for the entire Central Valley. And the other one is reference ET maps also for the same area that try to help in irrigation decisions. All these can be accessed by internet and also by cellular, for example. Finally, as a summary, with this presentation, I try to show you our Chilean Central Valley, our water challenges under the current mega drought, some national and local strategies to improve water use efficiency, and the role of the universities under these conditions. Well, thanks again to the organizers of this conference, and thanks to the California Irrigation Institute for this invitation.
Thank you so much, Octavio. I think we can now start with the question and answer. There's a first question for David Dole. It was put in the chat and it was also answered, but I'd like to put to the entire audience of this session. David, could you speak a little more on the use of high density polyethylene pipes for main lines and sub-mains? When is it preferred to PVC pipes? And this is the first question. And then we'll go on with the other that we have available. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I just noticed. So I think that is something that was a little bit unique from Europe versus California. They use a lot of high density polyethylene here, mostly due to the undulating terrain and the amount of rocks that are found within the soil. It's very common when you're putting a trench in to bury a pipe to hit a giant granite boulder that you have to work around. And this provides you the flexibility that you can actually make those quick elevation changes and work around that pipe. It's typically used in our lower pressure, our secondary, tertiary lines. We're not using it mostly in our primaries, is due to the expense. Those still tend to be worked with PVC. But PVC in Europe tends to be a little bit higher price than what you tend to see in California. So the price differential isn't as great, mostly due to limited manufacturers across Spain and Portugal. And it's a little bit easier to transfer high density polyethylene because they put it on these big rolls that actually will come on the back of a truck. Other than that, the things that I think that's interesting about high density polyethylene is it's a lot easier to plug in your risers for your system. So your secondary, your lateral going out that you're plugging in your risers, it's just polyethylene. It's a very simple process. There's no joints. They drill a hole and pop in a plug with a gasket, and it generally works really well. The other thing is with the rocks and the vibration that you have or the movement of that pipe over time, with the amount of rocks that we tend to typically see, you'll get a lot of friction rubs or abrasion rubs on the PVC, which will wear holes in it. So that's another preference why we look at high density polyethylene over PVC.
Thank you, David. I also have a question for Dr. Steduto. California is currently going to a round of financial incentive to modernize on-farm irrigation towards higher efficiency practices and irrigation system. Now, you talked about the rebound effect. That means when the total water uses increase as a result of adopting high-tech irrigation system and practices. Now, how can we make sure that doesn't happen in California? So what could prevent that to happen? would capping the amount of water available or setting sustainable limits of water consumption could be effective measure to avoid this rebound effect of high-tech irrigation?
Thank you, Daniele, for the question. I would say, generally speaking, the rebound effect and the behavior of farmers that provide this type of response is quite rational. Because with the high, let's say, valuable resources and with the techniques of irrigation and the technology associated with it, the productivity increase, and therefore it is natural and rational that the response is to increase to use more water. So the point is not as much preventing the rebound effect behavior as much as the impact of that. So we need to associate to the efficiency increase, to the let's say the increase in productivity, the fact that there should be a limit for the water consumption. The expansion of irrigation per se is an increase in consumption. So how much this can go needs to be, let's say, evaluated properly in terms of sustainability. So definitely capping the allocation for certain agricultural, let's say, both the whole sector or certain area is relevant. And however, the combination, let's say, of limiting the consumption, so putting the cap for the allocation to the sector, associated with the high tech and other opportunity for increasing or maximize the water productivity, can give the, let's say, the most positive result. So definitely capping, limiting the consumption is a measure that should accompany any technological improvement if sustainability has to be ensured.
Thank you so much. I have a question for David Dahl. So what do you think are the necessary skill sets that should be available at the farm level to operate more precise and more controlled irrigation management for fruit and nut crops, or for operating different types of deficit irrigation practices, and whether those are normally available on individual farms, which are the non-corporate farms in your area?
Yeah, I think I'm going to turn that around a little bit. Maybe I should focus on what I've had to teach and help people learn. So I'll start off to say that within Portugal, as well as within Spain, I feel there's a very strong foundation of agronomic science. A lot of people have an understanding of the soil. I think where, at least within Portugal, they're learning is the application of water to that soil and learning how to better manage those soils in order to get the water in. We struggle a lot with water infiltration here, and it has a lot to do with the chemistry associated with the soil, especially in the top few inches, the timing of application, the rate of application, and the general just water need at a given time of the year. I feel it's a lot of the same things I did when I was a farm advisor. You have to get people out to understand what they're doing and when. Augering into the soil, getting a feel for it, because there's a lot of variability, you have to take that into account. I think there's an over-reliance on, I'll back up, I think a lot of farms want to run lean in personnel, but that creates a lot of issues because it doesn't get someone into the field and you become over-reliant on sensors. The sensors help, especially when they're overlaid with multiple other aspects, such as, let's say, aerial imagery, but it's not the same as going out and checking to make sure things are running right. I would also add that with automation, there's a lot of stuck valves. Doesn't matter what system you're in. This is the same with my experience with working with people in Australia. Stuck valves happen, and you have to be available, and you have to have someone going through the field to make sure things are working as expected, checking the water meters to make sure it's there. But as far as the skill set, I would say it's a lot of clear record keeping, a lot of just getting out, feeling the soil, letting them know what's right and what's wrong. And as far as operating the technology, it's not that hard. I figured out how to do it. It was all in Portuguese. So I think that says enough right there.
All right, thank you so much. Dr. Ferreres, I have a question for you. In your presentation, you show that when farmers implement deficit irrigation strategies in nut crops or olives, they move along a line of increasing the marginal water productivity. Could you explain, the economic implication of such an increase for farmers and also for, water regulators? And is there any case in Spain when this high marginal water productivity is rewarded for growers, and what kind of policy is necessary to have it in place?
Thank you, Daniele. I'll make a few comments on that issue that you raised. On one hand, our farmers are going up that curve in more or less from very low actual ET levels, 40, 50%. So the return for the extra acre inch is very high. So they will seek to get as much water as they possibly can within the regulations, because they are going up the curve. In California, on the opposite, you're going down the curve from the full supply to less than full supply. So you're going the other direction and in a different point of the curve. So you have an option to reduce your water consumption and not lose much production yet in many conditions. Now, the comparison that I put between California and Spain, if you look at the water use in California, that figure came from DWR standard water use in agriculture. And I heard this in the previous session that Heather said that you still don't know how much water agriculture is using in the state. So I think water accounting, better water accounting, we all need it. The situation here is much more highly regulated by the basin water authorities that you have it there. As David mentioned, the groundwater is also controlled, and you cannot open wells without the permits. And the groundwater basins are also collectively managed. So we have a better hold on the very limited water resources. But we are, at the point where additional water provides you a much higher yield that in your case. So in that regard, the situation in California is more promising in terms of reducing agricultural water use. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Question to Octavio Lagos. In your presentation, you showed a decreasing trend in seasonal rainfall in the Chile Central Valley. Given that negative trend, why is the Chilean government promoting the construction of 26 new large dams, and where will the water supply come for filling those new surface reservoirs?
Thank you, Daniele. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, what happened is we have reservoirs in Chile. I think our total capacity is around 5,000 million cubic meters of water. But those reservoirs are located in the north part of the country. So, in one particular slide, I showed the reduction in precipitation from the previous year, and that was very important in the north part. The reduction was 70%, 80%. And but on contrary, in the south part, the reduction was important, but was less. So what they are promoting, or the idea under this plan, is to build new reservoirs in the south area. In the south area where we have more water, more flow in the rivers during the winter, and also is starting to have much less water during the summer. Because you know, when the temperature increase, also the snow storage also decrease. So that water is running during the winter month, and there is less water for summer. So that is the situation that create this idea or create this necessity to storage that water during the winter, to use it during summer months. More or less, that is the explanation.
Okay, thank you so much. Stuart, would you like to ask some questions to the audience? And I encourage, sorry, to the speakers, and I also encourage the audience to put question in the chat and not in the Q&A. So Stuart, if you have any question.
No, I don't have any additional questions at this time. I looked through the chat and I didn't see any additional questions there either.
All right. So before closing the session, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your time and contribution to this Ag breakout session. You're all international experts, and you're all familiar with the California irrigated agriculture and water management challenges. Now, I'd like to ask you if you can give us, a very short consideration, a very short statement about what California can learn from the experience that you have developed and from the expertise that you have deployed in your areas, in the areas of your work. So probably we should start with Pasquale, and then we'll close the session after each of you provide this short indication of what California can learn from your experience.
Okay, Daniele, what I can say is that when we look at the status of water resources in the Near East and North Africa as compared to California, of course, the status of scarcity is very high. I mean, it cannot be compared. But in a way, if you project in the future that can be a progressive scarcity increment in California, I think that the major lesson learned is the coordination and integration effort between the various stakeholders, the various users of water resources. Because at some point, the competition among the different users will come into play stronger and stronger, and an overall optimal solution needs to be found. And by coordinating the sustainability, can be much more granted. So I would say that there is more necessity to reduce fragmentation among users and bring an overall coordinated action in the water consumption toward water sustainability.
Thank you so much. David, your turn. You're probably the one that who is more familiar with the Central Valley Ag Water Management Challenge, or at least the one has, the fresher memory of what is it all about. So please.
I feel there's an opportunity for us to probably reevaluate our operations and look at how we balance our operations in respect to the crop footprint. I think that's something we need to be looking at and considering, especially as we head into SGMA, as well as limited water resources. I think the other thing I would bring up is, it's not always about producing the highest yields. There's an opportunity to utilize water in a very efficient standard and produce more with, produce high yields with probably a little bit less water than what's typically applied. But it has to be applied timely and appropriately. I think the timing is a major component when you look at any sustained or managed deficit irrigation. I think that'll probably lead into what Elias was going to say. So.
All right, thank you so much. Professor Ferreres, you're also very familiar with the California, Central Valley, and San Joaquin Valley Ag Water Management Challenge in the Central Coast as well and Southern Coast. So please.
Yeah, we have stretched our water resources much closer to the limit in agriculture that you have in California. I think you have the opportunity to optimize the water use, just as David was mentioning, without much impact on the production, and certainly with better net margins overall and better sustainability prospects, because there are other areas here as well as there where the time trend is going against the odds, and a big drought like the one we saw in Chile could really cause substantial losses, and farmers have to be prepared for those situations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Octavio, you're also kind of familiar. You worked with me in 2017 and 18 in citrus and pistachio and almonds and a bunch of other extension activities. So please give us your consideration about what California can learn from Chile.
Well, I think an important issue is the extension programs, is the education programs, not only for farmers, also for the people who is using the system, is a good tool to increase the irrigation efficiency. But teaching not only irrigation, I'm thinking in teaching also new technologies, teaching how to use sensors, teaching how to use wireless technology, for example. With new technologies, new requirements of training is always need, and I think it's an important tool to increase the efficiency of water in agriculture. And if we have more programs, if we have more extension activities, I think we can do an important step.
Okay. Before closing this session, there is a consideration put in the chat by Blake Sandon. It say that it's interesting that the Goldhammer Ferreira's 49 inches ET reported in their 2017 paper from the Southern San Joaquin Valley is almost exactly the average ET number that Joel Kimmershoe from Land IQ has show in a previous session in almonds in the last few years. So this is a confirmation that probably Land IQ is on the right path for estimating ET with a lot of ground truthing, and so it's Blake is acknowledging this multiple efforts. So without taking too much of your time, I think you're all approaching evening and dinner time. So I thank you again for your help, contribution, expertise, and for everything. And I again thank all the sponsor and Stuart Style who co-moderating this session with me. It helped me a lot in the background on the technical issues for running the presentation because I'm not the super technology savvy on that side. So thank you, Stu, for your help. And again, thank you so much for your great talks and presentations. With that, Catherine, I think we can close the session and waive all the participants.
Thank you, Olaf.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.